Hello and welcome. My name is Lisa Hohenstein. I'm an outbound product manager for workflow automation in the Now platform. I've been working with the Now platform for almost 6 years, and I've just had my 3-year anniversary at ServiceNow, like a couple of months ago. This text is a little older, but this is how long I've been here. I'm joined by my amazing colleagues. Live on camera with me are Andrew Barnes and Brian Wimschläger. Please give a quick shout out and a small introduction. Andrew?
Brian?
Sure. Hey, I'm Brian Wimschläger. I am one of the product managers here at ServiceNow, and one of the products that I am PM for is Flow Designer. So I've been here just over 2 years and been working on Flow Designer since I've joined. So very excited to join today and hopefully be able to answer any of your questions that come up.
Oh,
Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me join you today, Lisa. I'm Andrew Barnes. I am a product success manager for Creator Workflows here at ServiceNow. And one of the things my team does is supports all of our wonderful platform products, and Flow Designer being one of them. And I have been working on and around ServiceNow for a little over 8 years, and have been here at ServiceNow for 3.5. And Flow Designer is one of my favorite products here at ServiceNow. And so I'm excited to talk about it with you today.
Yes, me too. So this is our 18th Academy session already, and we're coming up on our Academy anniversary, actually. The first session that we did was last year on June 30th. So we're almost one time around the sun with our Academy, which makes me quite proud because it's still going and we still have amazing topics to talk about. And today's topic is very exciting. It's Flow Designer. And I know a lot of people are maybe hesitant or haven't gotten around to work with Flow Designer yet. So today is all about migrating towards Flow Designer and our other workflow product. And we want to make sure that you know how to migrate and which technology to migrate to Flow Designer. So back in April, we already had one session that was going through Flow Designer best and good practices. And we hinted on some guidance on how to approach migrating from the old technology stack to the new one. This time around, we want to dedicate some more time on actual migration use cases. And as always, this session will be recorded, edited, and then posted to YouTube sometime next week. And I'll also share the presentation on the community post. And with that, we'll get into the agenda. So we'll kick this off with a little repetition from the last session for those who haven't seen the last Academy. We'll give you a brief overview of the Flow Designer history so far and some arguments on why we think it's time, and really has been time for a while, to consider switching, start switching and adopt Flow Designer and the other newer workflow tools over the leg. And to guide you on your migration journey, we want to supply you with what we think is the best approach to start this process, and some a highlight tour covering most, but probably not all, of the use cases that are already possible, Flow Designer, Pad, and Decisions today, and how they make your life easier. My wonderful friend Andrew already posted, yes, please put any questions that you have in the Q&A section so we can keep track of the answers, answer them either live or at the end of this. So how did we get here? Well, that's a very good question, and I have a couple of slides detailing that. The Flow Designer history is a lot longer than I expected when I started researching this topic for the last session that we did. We actually started releasing Flow Designer back in Kingston as mostly an alternative to async business. And in London, we went beyond orchestration and we added complex and dynamic integrations, reusable components, and also catalog fulfillment, which I think is probably the most prominent use case that we usually have for flows and workflows, is a lot of request fulfillment part. With Madrid, we brought foreground or background execution to make it a real workflow alternative and to make ourselves iPaaS. In New York, we expanded Integration Hub to deliver enterprise-grade integrations, but we also added the Run From API option and more flow configuration options. Orlando then brought some action steps to easily parse and use complex data, that is XML and JSON, and we added dynamic flows and dynamic action outputs. And finally, one of the very handy features that we have in Flow Designer, that is transform function. In Paris, we added loads of things. So this list just gets longer and longer with each release. It's ridiculous. Paris added run with roles, content X, filtering, decision table action, duplicate action, or subflow, which is very handy if you want to reuse the same done before, but don't want to configure all of it again. We added flow data definitions specifically for the integration and the use of flows to support and power process automation designer activity. And then with Quebec, we brought wonderful UI redesign. Our amazing designers made a really great job to make flow look even better and be more accessible. We added flow variables, which one of the features that have been asked for ages, like forever. People wanted their scratchpad variables. We now have them in Flow Designer. And then there's also a UI to set feature act. So imagine you have citizen developers in your HR department and you want to give them the power of Flow Designer, but you definitely don't want them to be able to change things in your Active Directory or any other system that they shouldn't have access to. So you can determine that those people per role only have access to, say, the Workday spoke, so content filtering is a very powerful tool. The next to last release, Rome brought action and flow error handling. Again, feature that has been asked for a long time. Faster performance and the option to set the logging levels to your own needs and more transform function. We're almost in the present with the San Diego release. So San Diego, released in March this year, brought us more options to build in new ways. This is the very first release that we have the option for flow diagramming, and it allows you to see the path of your flow that your flow can follow and the connection between the elements. And developers being able to save scope flows as reusable templates is extra powerful because it will improve accessibility for your low and no code developer. And the third big feature in San Diego is adding the try and catch error logic into your flow, which allows for a flow to be more robust and to continue running even when an error. And some smaller enhancements include managing feature access, flow error handler, transform functions, more transform functions. We just need more transform functions. And then some updates and edits to the run start date time data fields and how the dates are stored and giving you access to having the run time also in UTC and local.
So Lisa,
yes,
I thought maybe we might give Brian an opportunity to share a little bit about which of the things in San Diego he thought was the most impactful, since that was his baby.
Yeah, well, thank you. I would say diagramming was definitely the most fulfilling. We've had a tremendously positive customer response from diagramming so far. I know we talked with a few of the folks that are on the call that have been early adopters, and we know there's a long way to go. But even just the initial reactions of saying, hey, this diagram view makes it so much easier to share what I'm working on with a business stakeholder, that seems to have achieved a really big outcome. And we know there's more support coming, things like support for service catalog and stages and annotations, things like that really help you decorate your flow and make it more valuable. It's all coming. But San Diego is, diagramming in San Diego was a favorite for me personally and for our engineering team.
Oh, thanks for sharing.
I think so too. So Flow Designer objections. Have you started using Flow Designer? Let me share the results. The majority have already used Flow Designer, which makes me very, very happy. At least some use cases. So we're at over 80%. That's amazing. But I think we can get to more people using it for most cases or all of them. So I would love to for those numbers to go up. And I hope this session will help you go that path. And then second of all, what have been your biggest objections? We have some for performance, some for usability, most for features. I mean, that's going to improve with the time. And then enablement. That's also what we're here for. And for the people who say other objections, let me see, what are your objections in chat? All right. Ellen, yes, there are more use cases than just flows. That's correct. And some of those we're going to be talking about today. It's true. It's not just workflows.
Absolutely right. And we are actually going to touch on several of those
Yes.
in just a moment.
That's what we're here for.
Which is a nice setup there.
Yeah. Then Rohan says, flows get queued. That's the biggest problem I've seen. So that would be in the flow, in the order of executing engines. Do you have a word for that, Brian?
Yes, I mean, there are ways to like run your flows faster, or, you know, assign higher priority. Like a lot of things in Flow Designer, there are a lot of buttons and switches and ways that you can modify. But if you're running a super high volume of flows, eventually queuing is going to be a thing that you have to be concerned about. But you know, if some of the things that we're exploring in the future, you know, not committed to anything yet, but some of the things that we're exploring is being able to attach priority to certain flows. Like similar how in previous releases or recent releases, you can say, hey, I want reporting to be different on this flow than that flow. We're exploring ways to assign priority differently based on certain flows as well. That's
awesome. Thank you. So for some of this is, if you compare flows or regular flows with business rules, the ones that get queued would be similar to async business rules. So async business rules would be queued just the same way that the flows will be today. Similarly, as was mentioned here, if you configure your flow to run in the foreground or is synchronous, then it would be just like an after business rule and would run faster than the async version.
The one thing I want to expand on a little bit on the wording there, Lisa, is this isn't about how fast the flow runs itself, the execution time, but how soon the execution is invoked. So
that's
the speed of the flow is going to be the same.
Yes.
It's when in your engine ordering is it going to get invoked? So how near to when the trigger was invoked?
Going into the arguments, some of those, the people who were in here in the session last time may already know this slide, but I'll still go through it real quick. The main benefits of using Flow Designer over legacy technology is, well, first of all, it is our current technology and we're actively developing new features. We are not removing workflow anytime soon. It will not be retired. As of now, we have no plans. You will get ample notice, but I mean, execution plans are still around. We rarely ever shut something off completely. But it has entered a maintenance state. So the important part here is we're no longer actively developing new features and functions for either workflow or orchestration. And all innovation is being poured into Flow Designer and integration. So I think that's the key thing. Yes, Eric. UI 11 is still there. So CMS is still there. Execution plans are still there. The only thing that I think is not there is list v3. But other than that, I don't think we hardly shut down anything. But still, that doesn't I don't want to encourage you to keep your old things. I really want to encourage you to give Flow Designer the chance that it deserves, because it has, in general, a better performance than our workflows. It is faster, it is more reliable. Having low-code logic makes your processes, your apps more robust and thus more upgrade safe, because it's really hard to put in typos into non-scripting logic. And with that, you will also incur a lot less tech debt. The second argument is really usability and reusability. So creating subflows and flow actions allows you to reuse them in other contexts and create contained units of logic that are easier to understand and maintain. The same, of course, goes for flow templates then. Looking at the flow designer layout, especially with flow diagramming now, it makes it a lot easier to understand what a given flow does than it would be with long scripts. If you have a script that is, I don't know, 100, 200, 400 lines long, it takes you a while to understand what's happening, especially if it calls other script includes and maybe the functions you call are named in a speaking manner, so you don't necessarily know what's happening and you have to click through and figure out what's happening in your script. I think that's a lot better in flows and with flow act. Then the third part is something that I've touched upon earlier, low-code accessibility. So we have easier access, and we want to also promote the delegated development. We've talked about feature access and content filtering to make sure that the low-code developers, the citizen developers, the process owners you want to involve only have access to those features that they need to use. And then lastly, and most importantly, Flow Designer and Integration Hub have reached and exceeded the functionality, if not before, then at the latest with the Quebec release. There are very, very minor, very few things that aren't possible in Flow Designer yet. And as far as I know, all of them on purpose. So it's not an oversight that we don't allow these things. If you want to know more, we had some more info in the previous session, and I will link to that in the other. I will link to the previous session in the show notes and in the video, and I will also post it in chat for those who haven't seen it yet. And then next, if you use the new and modern tech stack, it opens the door to use even more new tools. One of them is one of my really favorite, most underappreciated small thing, but it makes your life so much easier, and that is decision tables. Decision tables allow you to remove complex if-then-else logic from your flows or case switch things, make decisions in an easy-to-use interface, and you can also grant delegated development to, say, process owners. So decoupling your decisions from your logic allows you to have those process owners decide if the threshold for the extra approval is $1,000 or $2,000. As a developer, you most likely don't care, but they do. And if you have the decisions in decision tables and not in your flow logic, it makes it a lot easier, and you don't have to go through the whole publishing process for the flow every time a number changes. Second, consider using Process Automation Designer. If you already build flows with smaller, targeted, and reusable subflows and flow actions, it makes it a lot easier to switch to Process Automation Designer when your processes become more complex. You can use the subflows and flow actions to power the individual Process Automation Designer activities. And at the end of the day, you may need dedicated smaller projects to handle migration for specific groups, but I want to encourage you to look at what you already have and create those reusable components. And then the third part is Automation Engine. So Automation Engine brings you the power of 3 products now to allow you to automate integrations and document processing. You likely know Integration Hub already, which is there to have integrations provided by ServiceNow to third-party APIs. And you can also create your own custom integrations. The second will be RPA, so Robotic Process Automation, which allows you to integrate with systems that do not have an API. Andrew and Daniel have done an awesome lab at Knowledge about it. So if you're interested about that, I'll link that in the resources of this presentation as well. So yes, robots rule the world, Daniel. And then lastly, the newest addition to Automation Engine is called Document Intelligence, which allows you to extract data from scanned documents or printed or whatever documents, PDFs that you upload to the system. And it actually gets the fields and the value in those fields, and you can use them in your process. Very exciting. I think that's all I wanted to do about this, to tell you about this.
Well, I think that's a nice setup to talking about, well, let's get started. Let's do it.
Awesome.
So let's give you some guidelines on how to actually begin your migration journey if you haven't already started it. If you've already started it, hopefully we can add in some tips and findings. And if you have some, please share them with us. So if you're here live, put them in the chat. And if you're watching this later, put it in the comments in the YouTube and we'll come back and read them and incorporate them. So if you are starting a migration project, you might have seen something like this before, which is, a big project plan with multiple phases. And the first phase here that we're outlining is, determine all of the different places that we could migrate from, and then to Flow Designer. So I'm going to leak a little spoiler here. We're not going to suggest this plan, so don't get nervous. But if you were going to approach it from this angle, you could identify all of the different workflows, the business rules, the script includes, the scheduled jobs, those inbound emails, all of the different things that Flow Designer can actually achieve in a more low code manner, and document them all. And then, then you move into that second phase. If you somehow completed the first one, and start to actually like make a plan and assign these tasks out and have a 2-year plan to do this big migration. This isn't actually how we suggest doing this. One, because it's too resource intensive and freezes active, productive development, delivering more value directly to your organization. So let's shelve this and look at what our proposed plan is. So if you could step me forward, Lisa.
Yeah.
All right. So our migration recommendation, the first step, even before you get to these, is learn Flow Designer. So get someone on your team who's experienced with Flow Designer, understands it. So appoint a champion in your organization to go and learn Flow Designer, get comfortable with it, and can be that central resource for your team to go through this migration process. But once you've done that and decided that you would like to start taking advantage of Flow Designer, which, as Lisa pointed out, unlocks some of those other components. So it's not just useful to do in and of itself, it is an unlocking mechanism for other opportunities. Here's how we've structured an approach, which is establish a plan and a process for what you're going to target. And that is, that governance piece. This isn't, big, heavy-handed governance. This is team governance for your team to govern how you're going to approach this process, which is one really good rule that we found is new requirements as they're coming in. If Flow Designer can solve the problem, then that is an easy sort of guideline for your team to now start using Flow Designer for new development to meet new needs as those requirements are coming in. So, this is an easy way to get started to making sure that your team understands the power of these before we start overhauling other existing things. Then as you are getting familiar and you're getting requests to change existing workflows and processes, and those need to be overhauled, well, that is a good opportunity then to move it from where it is, be that asynchronous business rule or workflow, to Flow Designer.
You touch it, you move it.
If you touch it, you move it. Exactly, Lisa. So if I'm going in and making a significant change to an old workflow, that's a great opportunity to see if I can, break that up into parts. And I'm actually going to skip a little bit to the incremental part there is if I'm enhancing a workflow and pulling it into my process, I don't have to convert it all at once. I can actually convert the parts that I'm working on into flows and then invoke the workflow from that call a workflow action.
Or the other way around.
or the other way around. So I can, have that established workflow and call my flow from there. So absolutely. So that's, for your work. And then looking at, ServiceNow's provided functionality is another good time. So in this adopt a baseline section here is when you can look at moving from the old workflows of change to adopting the new change flows, for example. And there's other opportunities like that as ServiceNow has converted its workflows, and we're gonna touch on that in just a moment as well, in more particulars. We have been shipping more things with flows that replace those legacy workflows, and as part of this strategy, that's a good time to consider these and bring those in. And then being prescriptive about it, right? So setting aside a time. So once you're comfortable, you've got this in, your whole team is able to build flows, you understand them, then you can start setting goals and time to do conversions as you're working on things and getting and unlocking that new power in Flow Designer. And it's not just those. One thing I want to add to some of those tools is as we move to more low code methods, we unlock the ability to do things like being able to collaborate with others, like our business developers or citizen developers, and allow them to contribute to the flows that are running their processes. So part of this conversion can tie into other organizational goals by doing things like empowering those distributed and citizen developers to come collaborate on their workflows now that we've made them into Flow Designer and made it accessible to them. And as part of that, that expert that I said to designate is a good thing to do whenever you have a process like that. Establish something like office hours. You can do a community of practice as well to share questions and answers around, moving to Flow Designer and centralizing those things into something like office hours helps, keep some of that interrupt away from that expert and, centralizes it to a given time and allows other folks to hear and collaborate on those. So you get some scale at that time. The last thing in the incremental before we move on is you can reference, we talked about referencing calling the workflows and calling flows from workflows. The other thing you can do is, you can invoke script includes from inside custom actions in your flows until they have been moved into direct low code alternatives like a spoke in Integration Hub. So we think, and we've worked with customers to do conversions just like this. And this is, a successful strategy for migration for, in particular, all of these things we've set in the flow context. But this actually works for more than just Flow Designer. I've done very similar strategies with customers around automated test framework adoption, for example. The process is very similar process. So before we move to the next slide, Lisa, do we have any thoughts or comments from you on this one?
I think maybe one more thing adding to the adopting the baseline. One thing there is not just moving from the previous version that we shipped with our earlier releases, but it's also a moment to analyze possible custom implementations. So if you and if your instance has been around longer, maybe you haven't ever used out-of-the-box processes for these things. Maybe you have your custom implementation for change flows or CSM processes. And when you do this migration, this is an awesome chance to check out what we are delivering by now. And I know that, for example, change is also making heavy use of decision tables in their change policies. So this is a great chance to replace custom implementations with out of the box again, making your upgrade lives easier, making your testing lives easier. So that is one more point I had for this week.
Oh, excellent point, Lisa, and really, really good call out there that I forgot to mention. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So, for example, in a past life, I'll give you a little anecdote. In a previous system, it didn't have an email engine, and so my team had to craft an email engine in the system, and then once that provider actually built it in. Eventually, we made the decision to convert to the out-of-the-box one because then we didn't have to maintain that anymore. And so, a very similar thing here is you may have built functionality that now ServiceNow has made baseline, and this is a good time to make those evaluations and do that conversion. Let's do the common objections. The first one here is, why should you use these low-code tools? I think we covered this to some extent. You allow unlocking of folks like citizen developers to contribute, but professional developers actually work faster in low-code tools as well. And it's more upgrade safe, and you can do things like make custom actions when you need. So that one seems pretty straightforward.
Nobody takes away the scripting from you. It's just, it's supposed to be in the place where it's supposed to be, and that is custom actions.
Yep. And so you've got a large code base. How do you even start? So like the process we just outlined is a good way to target that, which is, do this incrementally, take it on piecemeal as you need to adjust things, and, moving the new requirements into the new way is a good very first start. So looking at the ATF test suites for workflows and business rules, we've covered ATF quite a few times here on the Platform Academy in the earlier sessions. I think our first one, which is our anniversary one coming up, covers some of this, which is you want to test for outcomes instead of individual steps. And so ATFs that are designed that way will actually continue to work for you after this migration.
Yes. Next slide. And the fun thing is, Mark has asked the perfect question for this one. And he asked, within areas in ServiceNow, you still have workflow. 2 examples is knowledge bases or field service management. Is this also on the roadmap to have flow everywhere? This is perfect because...
Thank you for setting that up, Mark.
Thank you.
So, ServiceNow is adopting a similar strategy to the one that we're letting you know, which is they're doing it incrementally. As those products get overhauled, their workflows, they're moving them to Flow Designer. So their path is the same as our path. So this is just an easy setup there. Thank you, Mark. So if you've tried Flow Designer in the past, it is a ever evolving product. Thank you, Brian and Brian's team, delivering new features and functionality release over release. So give it a try. Check out some of our resources that we'll have to show you what is in, San Diego release and even the previous releases to get you up to speed on what Flow Designer can do for you today. And the last one on can't handle errors in Flow Designer. Well, hey, I just mentioned that you should check out the San Diego release. And one of the cool things in San Diego was the flow action error handler and try flow logic. So those have been enabled in Rome and San Diego for you, and that should solve that objection.
And also plugging this right here already, the next Academy session in 2 weeks will be about improving performance and debugging flows and going through error handling and try flow logic. So it's a topic, it's coming.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sure.
So we've mentioned this a little bit, which is, this is an opportunity for change. So you get a chance to not just convert from one process to another, but while you're doing that, you can do things like optimize that process. You can do things like simplifying more complex scenarios, now that you might have more access to the powerful actions in Flow Designer that can simplify how you built those processes and deliver value faster and with less complication and in that more upgrade safe way. So there's lots of opportunities when you're doing an overhaul to not just use the new tool directly, but you get to unlock the things that that new tool is providing you in those powerful actions and in the things like the subflows that you build that are reusable and can centralize those processes for you and unlocks other opportunities, like we said, like being able to use Process Automation Designer. So when you build those subflows and flows, that you can make them available to now fit into a process that you can leverage in Process Automation Designer. So that's super exciting that those feed into each other. And the other ones that we mentioned on the other side, like Automation Engine and Document Intelligence and RPA, all of these things start to come together when you unlock their power by leveraging Flow Designer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. That was really interesting. I think it's so helpful to have a strategy and a path forward. And in order to get your opinion on this, we'll now start the next poll. And while we do that, I will continue with the next slides and go through the key takeaways for this thing before I hit upon individual use cases. I think I hope that our main points are got very clear. Use the low-code workflow products. It accelerates your experienced developers and allows you to involve more low-coders and citizen developers. It'll also increase your development capacity at the end of the day, because if you include everyone can contribute to your processes become more efficient and more automated. Reusability, we've touched upon this a couple of times, is a big keyword. Reuse subflows, reuse process activity definitions, reuse decision tables in different processes where applicable. It reduces tech debt. We want to create upgrade safe workflows. And by workflows in that case, I mean flows and decisions and processes and everything that flows. Adopting baseline and accelerating the development velocity, and of course, making your upgrades faster. And then incremental migration, I think that one has been discussed enough. Replace what you touch. And now, just to give you some more info, we have a couple of minutes left, and I hope I get through most of those use cases. But if I do not, we are currently working on a small video series, and this is the first place we're announcing this. So we're working together with our awesome content creation teams to bring you specific and targeted videos for each of those use cases. So you will be able to find those on YouTube. We'll post them on the community, on all of the channels that you found this webinar on. So we want to make sure that you know exactly how do you get from point A, how do I get from my service catalog fulfillment workflow to doing this in Flow Designer? How do I do inbound email flows as opposed to inbound email actions? So we're very excited to work together with our colleagues, and Andrew and I are planning this thoroughly, and we hope we cover all of the use cases. But in case that we forget some, we would love all of your questions and ideas for use cases that you would love to see covered in a small video, in a small blog post to help you navigate those migration use cases. And
absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. More ideas, more input, more content is always good. In general, we want to divvy up the use cases that we could come up with in some different categories. First, there's workflows. I mean, Flow Designer replaces Workflow Editor, but not only that, it can also replace email inbound and as well as outbound email, and not just email, but notifications in general. Remind me to change the slide, Andrew. Because for the video series, Andrew pointed out, it should be all kinds of notifications, right? It's not just emails, it's also sending SMS or messages to Teams or Slack or through any of the other channels that we offer. And that's really one of the bigger use cases. What I failed to mention on the workflow part is I think the biggest part, and that the poll will probably show that too, the biggest part is service catalog fulfillment. And yes, thank you. The poll absolutely confirms it's 80% of people who want to see service catalog fulfillment topics. So our assumption was there. I'm very glad.
It's always nice to get a little validation.
Right? I think so too. And then the third bucket would be scripting, custom scripting. So replacing scheduled jobs with scheduled flows, replacing after or async business rules with flows, replacing script includes with reusable flow actions, or also called spokes. As we said before, if you want to take the iterative approach and you don't want to create everything at the same time, you can create custom actions and just call the script includes. And then lastly, of course, replacing complex if then else and case switch statements with decisions. And the fourth big bucket is integrations, of course. It's integrations either through Integration Hub or having scripted REST API, and also replacing using data stream actions as data sources that can be done, for example, in a new Integration Hub import tool, which allows you to do a low-code mapping, just like you have in Flow Designer, dragging and dropping and mapping the data pills, applying transforms in the interface to the data that comes in through a data stream action. So that is a really cool feature. If you haven't seen that yet, make sure to check it out. Especially everything around integrations. I want to call out, there's a Learn Integrations on the ServiceNow platform YouTube series on the dev program team by Chuck Tomasi. And he did a very great job going through all of those points using the REST API trigger, data streams, and the import Integration Hub import tool. So make sure to check that one out. All right, some fun things and examples. I can get through some of those, I think, I hope. So you remember workflow? It can look like this. It can look a lot more complex, but you can replace catalog fulfillment flows. You can see the stages, you can add stages in Flow Designer, and those will be just represented just as much in your portal, in your employee center, or wherever you need those stages. They're currently not supported on flow diagramming, but they will be in the future release. One big new feature in San Diego that I really, really love, I bet every one of you has at some point started to or scripted how to execute order guide items in a sequence so that they don't all run at the same time, but you cannot, I don't know, deliver the laptop if the person doesn't have an ID account yet, or you can't do much with your Outlook inbox if you don't have a password yet. So with Process Automation Designer, creating an order guide sequence makes the sequencing of request fulfillment so much easier. You can add new lanes. You can tell the lanes to run in parallel or after another, or when the previous one starts. You can have the same for the different items, and you can decide and move them around and drag and drop. It's super awesome. So definitely check this out. SLA workflows. I think those were some of the first that got adopted for Flow Designer and have been replaced also out of the box. So check those out. They do everything you're used to from workflow. You can wait for a duration of time for SLAs and do whatever you need to do for your SLAs to notify people. Right? Okay. This is one of my favorite slides. So workflows could get so complex and so hard to read.
It hurts my soul.
Have you seen these? I mean,
I rejected the peer reviews when they looked like this.
How would you ever figure out where to go from which and what happens in this flow? It's a lot better.
That was why I rejected, because I said, I can't actually understand what this is doing. Yes. Try again.
Thank you. Try again. Next. So our try again version is Process Automation Designer. And I think it makes processes to be so much more readable when you have this Kanban board style interface. And again, you can decide to have the different phases run one after the other in parallel. You can have conditional lanes with the latest release. You can run the different activities after another immediately, whatever you want. And also new in San Diego is optional activities. So if you want to learn how to do that, you can check out my CreatorCon lab, which is also on Now Learning, on Process Automation Designer and Playbooks. Those two labs teach you how to make use of ad hoc activities that can be added at runtime, which can be so powerful because your processes, you can sketch them out, but they rarely meet the reality. And sometimes you just need to add something at runtime. We've talked about inbound email processing. So replacing custom script again with easy to understand flow actions. Outbound emails, the same. We can combine Flow Designer and Decision Builder to decide which notification is supposed to be sent. So this is a really handy use case. If you want to just have one flow that runs for notifications, but depending on the stage or the priority or whatever other criteria, you want different notifications to be sent out to different people. Schedule jobs is another one that is rather obvious or not, I don't know. They run on a regular cadence and you can do the same with Flow Designer. We've talked about async and after business rules. So the only business rules that we currently cannot replace are the before business rules, before query, for example. So those should stay in business rules for now. Creating spokes instead of script includes or reusing script includes in spoke actions. Mentioned a couple of times. That's one of the bigger use cases when you migrate incrementally. And then if you give it a speaking name, it'll be so much easier to use in your flows going forward. So decisions, I've talked about this, replacing scripts or switch statements with decision tables is so useful because the new decision builder is so nice to use, especially since in San Diego, we've added the option to have multiple outputs, not just one, and to have outputs that are variables and not just reference tables. That makes it so much more useful and so much better. So I hope you give decision tables a whirl because they make your life so much easier. The rest of the slides that are coming are integrations. I've already pointed you to the YouTube series. And the only thing I want to start now is the last poll, just real quick. I want to get your feedback, how you like this session before everybody takes off.
And please give us feedback.
Yes, give us feedback.
Make these sessions better. Hopefully, if you go back and look at the very first one, which is anniversaries coming up, you'll see that we've actually taken your feedback and adjusted the program since then. And hopefully it's providing continually improved value to you.
Yeah. I love how active the chat was today. There were so many great questions and input. We love that. As I said, I will post the presentation too. You will get access to all of the good links, all of the info that I put in the information resources. Make sure to check them out. There's training, there's videos, there's knowledge courses. Check this out. I think Flow Designer is absolutely ready for the spotlight. That's about all I have to say for that. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Lisa, for having us. And thank you,
thing.
Brian, for sharing as well.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.